Fritz. 3 RDPOV. There was almost nothing left from the Eldian tribe after a few minutes of stomping the place. The terrain completely changed, and there weren't even any ruins to see complete destruction. Hito and Ymir left their Titan forms and only they realized how much destruction they caused, while Hito thought that they might have been overboard with it. Ymir on the other hand was feeling guilty after her rage was all released. She only then realized how she regretted her actions, as she knew she killed innocent people in her rampage. When she meant innocent people, she meant the children only. She's completely indifferent to the adults that she killed. I think we might have overdone it. Hito frowned at the destruction they caused. Yeah, Ymir muttered. Both of them walked to the place and they saw a truly horrid picture. Bodies that were dissected and bisected were all over the place. It's because of the sharp objects around. If it's only them, these bodies would only look like they're mashed potatoes. Not only that, they also saw children amongst the bodies around, and only then Hito made a look of remorse. They didn't deserve this. He can't justify this as necessary. He felt sorry for them, but still, he was less affected than thought he'd be. 1. While was indeed guilty of killing these children, it wasn't enough for him to be consumed in guilt. His exact feeling right now is like seeing his favorite pet die in front of him, nothing more, nothing less. However, Ymir was different. She fell to the ground and cried for them, as she was truly guilty of what she's done. The sins of the parents shouldn't be shouldered by their children. 5. Hito could only look at Ymir's crying form with pity. He didn't approach her because it's better for him to leave her like that for a while. Because she has to pour out her feelings or else she'd remain guilty for a long time. He was sure that she'd have a nightmare tonight. After a few minutes of crying, she finally calmed down. He approached her and gently touched her shoulder. Did you let it all out? Ymir stares at him and nodded while sniffing, helping her stand up. After that, all of a sudden they heard someone groaning in pain beside them. Both immediately glanced in the same direction. It was a man wearing a helmet and armor with him. For someone living in the medieval period, he must be of high status. While Hito had no idea who this man is, Ymir sure does. There's no way she'd forget this man. The man is responsible for enslaving their tribe, the preparator of her suffering. Chieftain Fritz. The future king, or was supposed to be until Hito's interference, chased a major change in the timeline of this world. The man looked pathetic. He didn't look mighty as he was before. He looked even more pathetic than most of the slaves. Seeing this man, he could feel Ymir's anger rising back. He was no idiot. He recalled back when she explained to him about the Eldians. He knew that she hated this man from her very core. If he guessed right, then this man is the chieftain of the Eldians. Fritz. Help me. The man started pleading for help. However, none of them moved to help him. Hito disliked this man. If half of the things that Ymir told him about Fritz, then this man could burn in hell for eternity and he wouldn't care. He'd laugh at him even. Because this beast in human skin deserves it that much. Ymir slowly approached her former master with burning anger. This man was the reason why she was suffering for most of her life. If he and people didn't exist, she wouldn't have suffered, and her people wouldn't have suffered. Her family would still be alive. And most importantly, she would be free and happy. This man took it anyway from her. She wanted nothing but this man's suffering. She wanted him to feel the same despair as she did back in the day. She wanted him to feel the helplessness when he enslaved her and her people. You. Ymir shouted at the man. She was so angry to form a proper sentence, but each of her words contained all of her anger, her rage for this very man. The man looked at her and realized who she was. Despite his situation, he showed how much of a bastard he was. My slave? Come help me. He wasn't pleading. He was demanding Ymir to help him. Hito took a few mouthfuls of deep breaths because if he didn't, he wouldn't be able to stop himself from killing the man himself. Arrogant till the end, this man deserves death. Ymir's body froze. Hearing Fritz made her want to listen to his demand and perform it, like the obedient little slave she was. The trauma was simply struck to her very core. She feared this man, and because of that fear, she became obedient, because she was afraid to add another layer of suffering to her life. Hito wanted to interfere before something happened. However, to his surprise, he didn't need to. No, Ymir answered while she gritted her teeth, trembling like a newborn cub, despite her fear for the man, and the trauma she got from him and his people. 3. She managed to refuse because a part of her wanted to be free. She didn't want to be this man's obedient little slave anymore. 1. Hito didn't know what to say at this moment. He was speechless. Honestly, words couldn't describe how proud he is. Ymir managed to free herself from Fritz. A smile curved from his mouth. Ymir, you are now truly free. What? Fritz couldn't believe it. His slave had the gall to refuse his demand like that? He started trembling in anger and shouted. You don't get to refuse me. You are my slave. You only exist to serve me. How dare a slave like you refuse my demand? So I will say this once more. I demand you to help me now. Hito stared at the pathetic excuse of a human being with a frosty gaze. Then he glanced back at Ymir with concern. Despite trembling in fear, she didn't do anything, because in her mind, she was free and it was only being reinforced as Fritz spoke. No, I'm not your slave anymore. I'm Ymir, and I'm a free person. Ymir shouted those words with all of her heart. 3. Hito couldn't stop himself from grinning. With this he can confidently say that she managed to conquer her inner demons and became a free person. From this day forth she's no longer a slave to the Eldians but a free girl named Ymir. You little, get in here so I can punish you. Fritz roared pathetically. This man finally lost it. How could he do that when he's clearly dying? Hito took a random stick on the ground and reinforced it with magecraft and gave it to Emir. Do it, end this animal's life, and be free. 6. Emir took the stick and understood what she was going to do. She approached Fritz's dying body, and she raised both hands above, trembling. But it didn't stop her from obtaining her freedom. Stab! She pierced the stick toward Fritz's head like tofu, killing him instantly. Emir started breathing heavily. This was the first time she killed someone in her human form, so it was understandable for her to feel panicked. But it didn't last long, because the person she killed deserved it. She never regretted it for a moment. Then she glanced at her savior, and with a trembling tone, she said, I did it. I am free. Yes, you are? Hito nodded with a smile on his face. 1. It's been a few hours since Emir killed the former chieftain, Fritz. They were still at the place looking for survivors. Honestly, both of them weren't expecting to find survivors. In fact, there were at least 100 of them. No, there weren't any Eldians in the survivors, but Emir's fellow slaves. While she felt no hatred for her people, the very same people who betrayed her, Hito wasn't the same. He felt conflict about these people. Anyway, it wasn't his place to judge them. They were really happy when they realized that they were no longer slaves, and many of them cried. Despite betraying Emir, he couldn't help but smile at the scene. It was heartwarming after all. So, what are you going to do now? He approached Emir and asked. Emir stared at him surprised and replied like it was the obvious thing in the world. I'm going to follow you. Hito opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he closed it again. He should have expected this to happen. Of course, she'd follow him. His original plan was after he helped her get her freedom he'd leave after. But it wasn't possible anymore, because this girl was using him as a lifeline. Without him, who knows what would happen to her. Right, so you'll follow me. Emir replied with an eager nod. That's it, he's bringing her with him. However, the question is how? He tried to close his eyes as he did before entering this world, and as he opened his eyes he was no longer in Emir's world. He was back in the space filled with reality bubbles. Welcome back. However, Hito didn't pay attention to the screen in front of him. He looked around to find Emir, only to see that she wasn't there. Fuck. He really hoped that she wouldn't panic when he disappeared from his sight. 1. A world of his own. Analyzing the ripples that you caused in this reality. Saving Emir, the founding Titan, and the origin of all possible Titan events in the future. You have gained 1 million achievement PTS. For the deed. 1. Killing a tenth of the Eldians' population. You have gained 5,000 achievement PTS. For the deed. Helping Emir kill Fritz, the man that started everything. You have gained 100,000 achievement PTS. For the deed. Freeing the Eldian slaves. You have gained 100 achievement points. For the deed. Hito couldn't help but blink. He gained achievement points that much. He knew Emir was important, but he never thought she'd be the origin of that reality. However, saving the slaves only got him 100 achievement points? Are they that insignificant? 2. Anyway, that wasn't his current problem. Right now he had to get Emir from her reality. Every passing second counts. Who knows what would that girl do now that he was gone? Can you bring Emir here? He went straight to the point. Unfortunately, no, not because we are incapable, but because no mortal would survive beyond the boundary of realities. Emir would have disintegrated out of existence if she were here. 1. That information made him blink. Mortals would disintegrate? But I'm a mortal though. You are not. What? But that's impossible. He lived as a human for his entire life. There's no way he's not mortal. It must have been some sort of mistake. It's a mistake. There's no way I'm not. No, it is not a mistake. We are certain that you are not mortal, or else the moment you got here you'd instantly get disintegrated. In the first place, a human doesn't have a magic core. 2. Hito wanted to refute that claim, but if he did he would be just fooling himself, so he decided to shut up and process the fact that he's not completely human. How? I was born human, live as a human. Hito muttered to himself, then after that he shook his head. While it was shocking information, he'd think about it later, but for now, he's going to focus on how to bring Emir. However, before he could say something, the screen wrote something. May we suggest a solution for your problem? Now, it's suggesting something or them, since it said we, meaning multiple people are writing whatever the screen was showing. Go on. Hito was about to propose bringing Emir back into his reality. However, he was going to be in a lot of trouble because of it, and he was definitely sure of it. Lumen's situation was just a fluke. He wasn't sure if he would show another girl to his family. They'd shrug it off as they did with Lumen. Honestly, he was surprised by how open-minded they are with Lumen, but if he bought Emir he wasn't sure how they would react. So, he'd like to hear their solution. Why not bring Emir to your world? That's exactly how he was about to propose to bring Emir into his reality, although it's not after hearing their solution. Honestly, he was a bit disappointed. That's exactly what I want to do, to bring Emir to my own reality. No, you misunderstand when we meant, we want to bring Emir to your world, not your reality. Hito didn't understand it for a moment before his eyes widened. Wait, I have my own personal world. Yes, the world you own is exactly the same template as Earth, one sun along with the moon. It also has its own solar system, except there are no humans or being that have the same intelligence as humans yet. He frowned. Of course, your world is still in the Triassic period. What? Are you seriously asking to put Emir in a world filled with dinosaurs? Hito exclaimed in disbelief. There was no way he'd put her there. 4. She's not going to be in danger anyway. After all, she got her Titan form. She'd be at the top of the food chain in your world, even with dinosaurs. That's not the problem. Then make them extinct. Throw a meteor or two, they'd die eventually. 8. Are they trying to be sarcastic? Because it's not. We are not being sarcastic, although there's another alternative way of removing the dinosaurs though. How? Delete them? His expression became deadpan and replied. And how exactly does that make sense? Sir, imagine your world as a game. In that game you're the developer. You create and destroy things as you will. A god of your own right. Just imagine deleting the dinosaurs, they'd be extinct. 6. He had a lot of questions to ask, but they could wait. He had to see his own personal world. He never thought the day he'd own one. So, where's my world? As soon as he said that, a reality bubble appeared right in front of him. He quickly realized that this must be his own world. He gently touched it and saw. No name verse. Threat level. Access. Administrator. As he touches it, he gets some information about his reality. It only has a single galaxy. It's smaller than the other realities by a large margin. But it didn't bother him. The fact that it has a hospitable planet is enough. His world is still in the Triassic period, like they said. Not only there's a lot of dinosaurs, there were also animals that were massive. A firefly that is as big as an average adult? Creepy. However, this was his reality. He could do almost everything. He decided to kill those he deemed a threat to the future inhabitants of this world. 1. Yes, since he owned an entire planet, his plan changed. At first it was only Ymir that he wanted to bring. However, with this he decided to bring the former slaves into his world too. From what he gathered, the Eldians weren't completely extinct, as he and Ymir only managed to wipe out 1/10 of their total population. If those people find out about the slaves, including Ymir, there's a high chance that they wanted them back. However, if they were in his world, they'd be safe from the Eldians. With that in mind, he started working. He made his world less dangerous. Please, as fascinating dinosaurs are, they're a serious threat to humans, especially ones in the medieval period. 7. To anyone who watched Jurassic Park, that is obvious. 1. Ymir. Right, so you'll follow me. Her savior spoke. Ymir nodded eagerly. That is always the plan, to follow him. There's no possible scenario in her mind without him. She'd rather die without him by her side. Then all of a sudden, right in front of her, her savior's body suddenly disappeared like dust. 4. Her brain couldn't process what just happened. It took her an entire minute to realize what happened. Only then, she started panicking like it was the end of the world, which isn't far-fetched because to her he was her entire world. She started screaming his name, while fanatically looking for a glimpse of her savior. Hito? Where are you? Hito. Her fanatic screaming eventually got the attention of the former slaves, but she couldn't care less. She continued looking and screaming around like a madwoman. Hito was her lifeline. Without him by her side, she didn't know what to do. He was her guide. Without him, she was a helpless little girl. Without him by her side is worse than death. The former slaves tried to calm her down, but they failed. They couldn't stop her because she started to cause physical harm to them. Ymir was going crazy until a few minutes later she eventually stopped, and her knees fell to the ground. If you pay attention to her eyes, they were scarily empty. They lost their previous light, and just like that she completely gave up on life. Despite being free, she wasn't happy because he wasn't here with her. Hito, Hito, Hito. She kept repeating his name like a broken record. It was the only thing inside her mind. Nothing else mattered. It was better for her to give up in life. Without him by her side, life has no meaning. After all, she owed everything to him. 4. However, unexpected things happened as her body along with the former slaves started glowing. While she couldn't care less about it, it wasn't the same for the former slaves. They were afraid. Humans fear the unknown. A moment later, one by one they vanished out of existence. By the time Ymir regained her eyesight, she saw someone she'd been looking for. Her savior. Tears fell from her eyes and she immediately dashed toward his direction and gave him the tightest hug that she could possibly muster. Hito? I thought you left me? I was so scared. 12. Hito gave her a guilty look. Sorry, it wasn't my intention to leave. I promise I won't do it again. Anyway, can you stop hugging me that tight? I'm having a hard time breathing. Sorry, it's just I don't want you to disappear. Ymir stopped hugging him reluctantly. Don't worry, I won't. Anyway, I should probably explain this, so listen closely because I don't want to repeat explaining this, he said with a serious look. Ymir nodded and then her savior started explaining. And what she heard made her jaw drop. Shocking revelation. Hito 1. Hito woke up from his bed. This time he was in a good mood after all. He managed to create a happy ending for Ymir. After explaining most things to Ymir, the way she looked at him changed. He could literally see the admiration and awe in her eyes. 5. He explained about owning a world. However, he didn't explain about beyond the boundary of reality, because not only she wouldn't understand it, he didn't think it was that important. Besides, he's the only one who could go there anyway. Anyway, after Ymir knew about him owning the world she's standing, the first thing that came out of her mouth was, "Are you God?" 1. And almost immediately he replied, "No, I'm not. There's no way I am." Him? A god? No way, he's just a mortal man. Okay, maybe not completely, but his point still stands. 2. Someone like him couldn't be God. Then Ymir suddenly replied with a point that he couldn't deny. But you own this world, right? You can do things humans can't with only your thoughts. Didn't you see you made 100 species extinct with just a thought? If that's not a power of God, then what is it? 1. That made him shut up. Indeed, those weren't things that humans could do. In his world, he was the developer. He could do almost everything. If it wasn't the power of God, then what is it? He doesn't know. He's just in denial as he got so much power in a short amount of time. Hito needed time to process this. He wouldn't be on his next Isekai adventure for about a week or so. Before he left the dreamscape or beyond the boundary of realities, he checked his new status, and honestly, he was surprised. True name, _@ Tadano Hitohito, 7. Power level, 5C tier 4. Title, The Warden of Realities 2. Authority, can only travel between realities with a power tier of 3C or below. Achievement point, 1,105,000. Skills, Gradation Air, Hypnosis, Reinforcement, Mystic Eyes of 3rd, Founding Titan. Now that he wasn't clueless like he was before about power level tiers, since they explained it to him. 5C was a planetary power level, meaning the screen thinks that he could destroy a moon, which he couldn't really refute. 2. He knew firsthand how powerful his Titan form was, not to mention if he mastered using reinforcement magecraft while in his Titan form, destroying a moon wouldn't be too hard. He went directly toward the bathroom to wash his face. He looked at himself in the mirror. He mostly looked the same, plain, and ordinary, but he noticed some changes, like his entire body was radiating with pure confidence. 3. Hito had no idea how he was doing this, but it wasn't a bad thing to have a passive aura of confidence in him. After cleaning himself in the bathroom, he went downstairs to the kitchen. Like always, he saw his sister cooking breakfast for the family, although surprisingly there was also an addition. It wasn't just his sister, but also Lumen, who was helping her with the dishes. Wait, isn't she his sister now too? 1. On a second thought, he can't really see her as a sister. There is no way he could. Good morning. He greeted them. Both his sister and Lumen greeted him as soon as they noticed his presence. Morning, Unai-chan. Good morning, Hito-san. After greeting them, he went to the dining table and asked, "So what are you guys cooking?" "Oh, nothing much, just miso soup, crispy rice with bacon and egg, and some boiled vegetables," Hitomi replied with a shrug. So a typical Japanese breakfast, good to know. However, it doesn't explain why Lumen is there. What about Lumen? Why is she in the kitchen? About that, she wanted to try cooking an omelette, Hitomi said while she was cracking eggs. 1. You're teaching her? No, she already knows how to make an omelette. It's just according to her. It's been a while since she tried cooking, isn't that right, sister? Hitomi glanced at Lumen with a smirk. Lumen became flustered as she heard Hitomi call her sister. She still wasn't used to it. Maybe it would take her a while to do so. Why yeah. Okay, he wasn't expecting that, but then again, he barely knew anything about Lumen's past, but he'll eventually get there. Because she was starting to crack, he knew that it was only a matter of time before she revealed her past. He had a feeling that it was going to be shocking, as he already suspected that she's part of the supernatural side of the world. There's no way she's ordinary. Even now he still couldn't understand her emotions. It was simply a mess. However, it's slightly calmer than before. Eventually, he'd get a proper read of her emotions, soon. After a half hour of waiting for breakfast, it was finally done, and at the same time, his parents arrived at the dining table. Of course, he didn't forget to greet them with a good morning. "Kids, your uncle called me last night and he invited us to go to his birthday party tomorrow." Jean sighs as she mentioned that. 2. Which uncle? Hitomi asked. Exactly his question. He had a lot of uncles, so he doesn't know which one his mother was talking about. "Oh, it's from the side of my family, my brother," Jean grumbles. From her reaction alone he can safely say that his mother doesn't have a great relationship with her brother. 1. Wait, mom has a brother. This is the first time I've heard of it. The uncle he mentioned was from his father's side. However, the family from his mother's side is almost unknown to him. As his mother rarely talks about her family, it wasn't that she was trying to hide it. It's just he never bothered asking his mom about it. Because it wasn't that important, until today. "You had a brother. How come I didn't know about it?" Hitomi exclaimed in surprise. 1. Exactly his reaction. They are truly siblings. Her words were exactly what he was about to say, but his sister beat him to it. "It's because you never asked. The last time I've seen my brother was a decade ago. He and Hito-chan actually met, but I doubt he could remember. Hito-chan was still an infant back then. Oh, I also remember Hito-chan playing with his youngest daughter. Both of them were so cute. I think I have a picture of the moment." Jean couldn't help but coo at the memory. 3. Hito was surprised to hear that he actually met his mom's brother back when he was still an infant. If so, it's understandable that he can't remember. He was still a child back then. "Also, I told you about Lu-chan. He said that he wanted to meet my newest daughter, so you're going to be with us tomorrow," Jean said. 1. Lumen could only nod at his mother's request. Maybe it's a good thing after all he never really saw Lumen go outside their house. This is a chance for her to go out and familiarize herself outside before going to school this Monday. "Mom, what's your brother's name, by the way?" he curiously asked. "Ganon, Shinomiya Ganon," Jean revealed. 14. For the first few seconds, he didn't recognize the name until he did, and to say that he was surprised was an understatement. He was shocked by this revelation. "What? You mean your brother is Shinomiya Ganon, the current CEO of the Shinomiya Group?" Jean nodded and said. "That's right. Is it really that surprising? Is she seriously saying that? How is this revelation not surprising? He just found out that his mother is the sister of one of the most influential men in Japan? Suddenly everything made sense. That's how she managed to adopt Lumen in a single day without any hassle? With such a powerful connection, doing something like his mother did was easy. Anyway, this means he and his sister are directly related to the Shinomiya group. Damn, to think the family of his mother's side is that influential. No wonder she's so confident when mentioned enrolling Lumen in Shuchiin Academy. She could easily arrange such a thing. Of course it is. I just heard one of the most shocking revelations that I heard in my entire life. I thought we were just an ordinary family. 3. Hito-chan, Mom never told you that we're ordinary. It's just your assumptions, Jean said. Hito didn't have any comeback for that, because he never heard his mom or dad claim that they are. He just assumed due to their living condition. 1. He suddenly got a headache. Too much revelation in a single day. Damn, he needed to relax his mind. So, we're actually rich. Hitomi just asked the right question. In the eyes of ordinary people, yes we are. After all, I earn 25 million per year, Jean said with a nod. Yen. He asked just to be sure. $. 4. Yep, it's official. They are rich, but if it's the case, then why are they living in an average Japanese house? 5. He would never understand what his parents were thinking. Lunchboxes. Hito. After finding out how much his mother earns yearly, he decided to ask his dad to earn yearly. The man had the gall to look embarrassed. He admitted that he earns $10 million a year, which was almost half of his mom's yearly earnings. What the heck? Why was he embarrassed? He's literally part of the top 1% with that kind of money yearly. They were a rich family and he just knew. For all his life he thought of his mom and dad were just ordinary salary man and woman. But it was only him who thought of that. Maybe his sister too, because after all he never saw his parents use a huge amount of money. Because they weren't like most rich folks, they managed to save a lot of money throughout the year. He saw it and honestly, he never thought he'd see so much zero in his life. With that kind of money, they could literally buy their entire neighborhood 5 times, that's how much money his parents had combined. He wondered if he asked for $1 million, would his parents give it to him? Nah, pretty sure they won't. No matter how much money they had in their shared bank account, $1 million is still a lot of money. On his way to school, he was using his phone to chat on the group chat his classmates made. The Royal Group, the group chat, contained the most popular kids in class. The group itself wasn't as bad as he thought it would be. The group chat is a pretty efficient way to kill time. As he arrived at his classroom, he was immediately greeted by the popular kids in the class, meaning they acknowledged him as one of them. He didn't think singing for them would have this effect. Of course, as a decent person he naturally greeted them back. Good morning. After that he sat down at his desk, then the class started. History was the first subject. Honestly, at least 90% of these lessons were going to be useless in the future anyway. That also applies to the rest of the subject. They were going to learn so much random information and most of it is going to be pretty much useless in his resume. No matter how good your grade was, you need the experience to get a job. However, since he learned that his family is rich, he doesn't need to struggle getting a decent job in the future. So as long as his grades are passable, he wouldn't have a problem in the future. Well-connected people had it easy. Lunchtime. Nijimai invited him to eat lunch with the other popular kids, but naturally, he refused as he was already part of another friend circle that he prefers. Thankfully Nijimai understood. He didn't make a fuss and went back to his friend circle. After rejecting Nijimai's invitation, he went and invited Komi, Nishimiya, and Kawasaki to eat lunch with him together. When they accepted, they gathered at his desk, then brought their respective desks toward him so that they could eat together. So, what's your lunch? He asked. Well, Kawasaki hesitated for a bit before eventually showing her lunch. Hito had one word to describe her meal. A kid's meal. There's even an octopus-styled red winers? Cute. Komi couldn't help but say, despite how low her voice was. Everyone from the circle heard it. 3. Maybe, except for Nishimiya. She's deaf after all. Wow, I thought octopus-styled wieners were just a myth to think they existed. Hito was looking at Kawasaki's meal with awe. What are you talking about? Of course, they exist. Kawasaki said flustered. Sorry, I couldn't stop myself from saying it, but still I never knew people still make octopus-styled wieners these days. Last time I saw someone make them was in elementary school. He replied sheepishly. Well, it's not surprising, it was definitely more popular before than it is now. Anyway, what about your lunch? Kawasaki demanded. It was clear that she wanted revenge for making her fluster. Too bad though his lunch wasn't a kid meal like hers. Then he showed her his lunch. Inside his lunchbox was an omelette that Lumen cooked this morning. An omelette? Kawasaki blinked in surprise. Yeah, he confirmed. But it's already cold. Kawasaki pointed out. So, he didn't see her point. It wouldn't be as tasty because it's not hot, Kawasaki stated. Oh, I see your point indeed. Hito then sliced the omelette with his chopsticks and it was dry as expected. However, it didn't stop him from eating it. He took a piece of the omelette and ate it. What is this? He stared at the omelette that Lumen made in disbelief and confusion. Kawasaki noticed his expression and asked. Hey, are you okay? He could hear a bit of her concern, which was nice. It showed that she cared for him at least. Yeah, no, actually I'm really confused right now. Here, try this. 2. Hito gave her a piece of omelette, although he didn't understand why she was flustered. Strange, he can never understand girls or women for that matter. What's up? And no, nothing. Kawasaki quickly replied, then she picked up the omelette piece that he gave her. She hesitated for a bit before tasting it herself. Her previous flustered expression completely disappeared, as her expression turned neutral to complete confusion as he did previously. Hey, why does omelette taste like curry? She was looking at his omelette with disbelief, awe, and confusion at the same time. 2. Yep, that's exactly what his reaction was. How the hell did Lumen create an omelette that tastes like curry? What sorcery did she use? It couldn't be a curry powder, because he knew what it tastes like, and it isn't anything like this. Not to mention, it doesn't even taste like chicken curry but a meat one. How could an egg taste like this? If this wasn't sorcery then he doesn't know what it is. That is exactly my question. How? He replied with resignation. Both of them were silent, before silently agreeing not to talk about this topic again because it was giving them a headache. 2. After the two of them finished talking, their attention was now on Komi. He asked, "So what's your lunch, Komi-san?" Hearing her name, her imaginary cat ears perked up and she eagerly showed her lunch. 6. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but her lunch was more typical than he expected: rice, boiled vegetables, egg rolls, and a friend's tuna. 3. She also had a miso soup container. Indeed, typical like his breakfast this morning. After knowing Komi's lunch, his attention shifted to Nishimiya, who was smiling at him as she saw him looking at him. 4. Ugh, how could a person be this cute? It's borderline illegal. He could literally see imaginary angel wings behind her back. 1. Shaking his head, he sent her a message through the line that says, "Mind showing us your lunch, Nishimiya-san?" She saw the message and nodded in his direction. She showed them her lunchbox and it was massive. Hito blinked. He wasn't going to judge her by her appetite, but seriously, Nishimiya doesn't look like a big eater. It was a 3-layer lunchbox. In the first layer had various meat dishes that were neatly arranged. The second layer contains fish dishes, such as fried shrimp, fried tuna, and sushi, and the last layer was rice. Of course, it's rice. An Asian lunchbox isn't complete without rice. 2. You can't call yourself Asian without rice in each meal. That's just the golden rule. 5. Whoa, that's a lot. Can you eat it alone? Kawasaki said with an uncertain tone. Hito couldn't help but snuggle Kawasaki's side and stared right into her eyes, silently sending the message. She's deaf, did you forget about it? Fortunately, she understood the message. Oh, my bad, I forgot that she's deaf. Kawasaki quickly wrote what she said in her notebook and showed it to Nishimiya. Nishimiya shook her head and replied using her notepad. No, actually I cooked this for you guys because I wanted to thank you for being my friends. Aw, she's shining. How noble, Nishimiya-san. 7. You are indeed the saint of it in private high school. Seeing her note, Kawasaki couldn't stop herself from feeling embarrassed, because it was the first time someone actually appreciates her for being their friend. Komi was also the same, however, her face didn't show it. Not that it's her fault, she's just natural being stoic. However, he could imagine her smiling happily in her imagination. He also appreciates her gesture, for this is also a first for him. He really got lucky with Nishimiya. After that, they thanked her for the food. Please help yourself. 1. Then the 4 of them started talking about the dishes in Nishimiya's lunch box and they couldn't help but think. Delicious. At that moment they realized how good Nishimiya is at cooking. Bless her soul for this. Magic circuit. Maiko. Today is the day she'd been waiting for, months of suffering without a proper solution to her problem. However, now she finally found a way to protect herself from ghosts. Every day she'd been challenged mentally, to the point she almost went insane. It was a miracle that she kept herself together. Maiko is very eager to start learning. As she was patiently waiting for her master to come, her best friend Hana suddenly complained. Boring? Hey, are you really going to wait for that guy, Maiko? Yes, even if I had to wait for hours, he's that important to me. Maiko didn't realize her wording until Hana pointed it out. I was joking yesterday about you falling in love at first sight. Don't tell me you did. Hana looked at her with a teasing smile. Wano? Don't be ridiculous. Maiko was quick to deny it while being flustered. Really? Hana became smug due to her previous reaction. Really? 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 Hana repeated. Really? 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 She repeated her question. Real, you know what, stop. Maiko had a feeling that if she continues to repeat the word really, her friend would multiply it. You're no fun. Hana pouted at her friend. Maiko shook her head at her friend's antics. After a few minutes of waiting, he arrived, which made her sigh in relief. It would seem that he truly intended to teach her exorcism. Sorry, did I make you wait too long? He looked apologetic at her. No, you did. Before she could finish her words, her friend suddenly interrupted her and said, well, duh. You made us wait for almost a half hour. What's your excuse for that? Hana gave Tadano-san a disapproving look. Tadano-san blinked a few times at her friend's question and smiled wearily. First of all, I didn't know where you guys were. After all, you guys didn't mention which place we're going to meet today. Secondly, I don't have your phone contacts. That's why I needed to search the entire first-year building to find you too. Hearing that he had a valid excuse, Hana deflated and looked at Tadano-san with a sorry look. Sorry. It's fine, can't blame you for being mad though. Anyway, now that I'm here, should I start? His attention was now on her. Why, yes. Please do. Maiko almost couldn't conceal her excitement, because finally, she would have the power to defend herself from the ghosts that are constantly making her fear for her dear life every single day. Alright then, before I teach you, promise me that you won't tell anyone about this, can you give me your word? Tadano-san asked her with a face that it's non-negotiable. Hey, about me. Hana raised her hand. Ah, right you, will you leave us here alone? Nope, Hana answered without hesitation. Thought so, you're an exception, however, promise me that whatever I'm going to do in this room will remain inside, or else the deal is off. He said seriously. No, she can't afford that, if she doesn't learn how to do that thing he did yesterday, she's screwed for life. Maiko gave her friend a pleasing look, hoping that she'd keep it a secret for her sake. Hana noticed this and released a sigh. Alright, I promise. Good. Tadano-san nodded satisfied with her friend's answer. Alright then, before we begin first I'm going to explain the power I'm going to teach you. It's called Magecraft. Magic. Hana said the word she was about to say. No, Magecraft is not magic, there's a difference between the two of them. He replied sternly. I don't get it, what's the difference? Again Hana was asking the same question that she was about to ask. Tadano-san gave her a strained smile. Are you the one who's going to learn or Yatsuya-san? Fine, the difference between magic and magecraft is that magic is something that science couldn't replicate, in other words, true miracles. Magic even real? Hana asked him doubtfully. Tadano-san started taking deep breaths at that question, then he stared at her and said, I'm going to ignore your friend, she's starting to get on my nerves. Hey, that's rude. Hana shouted in offense. True to his words, he ignored Hana, and she couldn't even blame him for doing that. Maiko gave her future mentor an apologetic look. Anyway, your friend doesn't have any experience in the supernatural world unlike you? He said while looking at her, completely ignoring Hana. What are you talking about? Anyway, magic is real. He looked at her in the eyes completely seriously. 2. Maiko didn't doubt him for a second, if she could see a ghost it wouldn't be far-fetched that magic existed. At this point, she's willing to believe everything. No matter how illogical they may be, the experience taught her that the world isn't what it seemed to be. Now, here's an example of magic. The materialization of the soul, which means true revival without any drawbacks. He explained. Maiko nodded at his explanation, indeed that's something that science can't replicate. 2. Then something clicked inside her as she realized that magic that could revive someone without any negative drawback existed. She was immediately dumbfounded as she realized that. Wait, so that means magic like that existed? Yep, it's one of the true magic heavens feel, although there isn't anyone capable of casting that magic in this era. He started with confidence. 2. I see. For a moment, she wanted to ask if he's capable of casting that kind of magic so that she may try to ask him to revive her late father, but it seems that's only a pipe dream. 2. Tadano-san frowned at her, and as if he read her mind. Sorry to disappoint you but I'm not capable of using that kind of magic. Whoever you wanted to revive I can't because I don't have it. Maiko winced a little at his words. And no, it's fine, it's just me being selfish. Tadano-san lips curved into a small smile. It's fine being selfish, anyway let's go back to magecraft lessons since it's completely impossible for you to learn magic, might as well focus on that part. Maiko noticed something about his wording. He says you not us, meaning he could learn magic, however, it might be just her overthinking things. Shaking her head and saying, so, how do I perform magecraft? Well, I have to awaken your dormant magic circuits, since I'm pretty sure that you have them. Your ability to see the supernatural is the biggest giveaway. Now give me your hand, Tadano-san said. Without hesitation, she reached for his hand, but after a few seconds, she realized that this was the first time she touched a boy's hand aside from her father and brother. 2. Maiko's cheeks gained a little pink tint, she thought. His hand is softer than I expected. From kindergarten to middle school, she'd been going to an all-girls school, so she never really interacted with the opposite sex that much aside from her family. Only now that she's in high school, has she experienced a co-ed school. However, his words snapped her from her musing. I'm going to warn you though, it's going to hurt. Tadano-san looked at her in the eyes with a serious expression. Honestly, it's kinda hot. Her treacherous thought betrayed her at such a moment, making her blush even more. 1. She quickly averted her eyes, because if she didn't she would look like a human tomato. Taking a few deep breaths, she calmed down, thankfully. Alright, I'm ready, please be gentle. 1. I will. Hana, who she forgot for a moment, suddenly said. Is it just me or are you two talking a bit lewdly? However, no one answered her. Without a warning, she suddenly felt hot, like there's molten lava inside her, not to mention her eyes also felt like they were burning. It was a miracle that she didn't pass out already. It's only her sheer will that she managed to stay conscious. Tadano-san stared at her in surprise, probably not expecting her to be still conscious. Maiko was breathing shakily, while her body was trembling non-stop. She also started sweating all over her body. Her friend noticed that she's struggling. Hana immediately helped her stand still while looking at her with concern. Hana shifts her gaze toward Tadano-san, glaring at his head as if she's looking inside his skull, not his face. What did you do to her? Tadano-san decided to answer her friend's question. I only awakened her dormant magic circuits, still it's quite surprising that she's still conscious after that. You dash. Before she could continue her sentence, Maiko cut her friend off. I am fine, so don't worry, it's nothing I can't handle. She gave her friend a reassuring smile. In reality, her body was in deep pain and she was holding her tears back, but she was a strong girl and she's going to endure this. 2. Hana hesitated, but after a minute, she finally let out a sigh and trusted her to know what she's doing. However, it certainly didn't stop her from glaring at Tadano-san, who was ignoring her friend's glare. Don't worry, the pain would stop after a day or two rest. After that I'd start teaching you magecraft. Anyway, before I leave, can I have your line so that I could contact you later? He said. Maiko gave him her line of contact, but Hana didn't, because of the stunt he pulled toward her. Hana's impression of him dropped drastically. It wasn't surprising, however. Isn't it a bit much to dislike him? After all, she did ask for this. He warned her beforehand and accepted the risk. Tadano-san looked like he didn't care about Hana's dislike of him. You probably dislike me for what I did to your friend, but trust me, I'm doing this to help your friend. Hopefully, you'll realize that, though I won't expect it, considering you have no clue of what we're doing. Tadano-san shrugs at Hana and continues. I'll go now, see you tomorrow, Yatsuya-san. After that, he left them alone, as Maiko couldn't stop herself from collapsing on the floor. Maiko. That was probably the most painful sensation that she experienced in her 17 years of life. But she didn't know this was only the beginning. After all, there's a popular saying amongst magi, to be a magus is to walk with death. 5. Ridiculously expensive. Hito. After he awakened Maiko's dormant magic circuits, he went directly back to his house because his parents called him, saying that they would go shopping for clothes for tomorrow's party. He can't remember when was the last time his family went shopping together, since his parents were usually busy. It would be just him and Hitomi for the past few years. Now, along with his new stepsister, Lumen went to the biggest mall in the city in his father's car. 1. Yes, his father's car. He knew that he had one, but he never saw this particular one. He honestly didn't know where his father was hiding this 4-seater Bugatti. 2. I didn't know you had this car, Dad. Of course, you don't, I just bought it. The way he says it is like it's normal, like it was nothing. He wanted to say more, but he stopped because, let's be real, this isn't shocking as owning a dim world of his own. A new car is nothing compared to that. Right, should I ask how much it is? He said. You already did. His father replied. Exactly, how much? Hito asked curiously. I don't remember the exact number, but I'm sure it's about 7 digits in number. Dollar, not yen. He said while he entered the blue 4-seater Bugatti. 2. Right, he wasn't even surprised about that. Hito entered the Bugatti and he really felt out of place for a moment. He never thought he'd ever ride a luxurious car in his life, but then again, getting superpowers and owning a world is more so. The seat was dim soft, softer than their sofa in the house. Now that he had a proper look inside the Bugatti, there's a lot of things he was unfamiliar with. It's too dim futuristic in his eyes. He felt like a country bumpkin seeing the city for the first time. Is that a fridge? Hito looked inside it and to his disappointment there's nothing. His father saw this and said, it's to be expected, after all, I just bought the car, I haven't put any drinks there yet. Yeah, I know. He waves his hands to his father. He somewhat expected this. As he got comfortable in his seat, his sister Hitomi went inside the car, and unlike him, she couldn't conceal her awe and amazement. Wow, I never thought I'd get to ride in such a luxurious car. I feel out of place. It's like I'm an entirely different world inside here. Amen, sister, exactly what he's feeling right now. Both of them, after all, lived a completely average life and weren't aware that they were rich the entire time. 1. He blames his parents for that because they never showed that they are rich or something. They act like average Japanese salary men and women. Then his mother sat right next to the driver's seat. And lastly, Lumen sat in between him and Hitomi. Since the Bugatti has only 4 seats, Lumen had no choice but to sit in the middle. She didn't mind though, or at least he thought she didn't mind. The Bugatti engine started. It was exceptionally loud, but it wasn't unpleasant, because it's much more controlled than others. On their way to the biggest mall, they were unusually quiet, not because of the lack of topics but because they were too occupied doing their own thing. There's a few times that the car bumps into something, making Lumen lean closer to his shoulder. Both of them were very aware of it but didn't say anything about it. Lumen wasn't even trying to move. Instead, he felt like she's leaning a bit closer every time the car bumped into something. 1. He wasn't sure if she's aware of it, but he wasn't complaining at all. Her skin is really soft, like they were marshmallows. It didn't take them long to arrive at the mall. As soon as they got out of the car in the parking lot, there were a lot of people looking at them, more specifically his family's car. And also Lumen, of course, not surprising considering that she's seriously good looking. No matter which type of clothing she's going to wear, even cardboard boxes, people would look at her because she's that attractive. Her looks are just otherworldly. A goddess amongst mortals, she'd give those popular female supermodels a run for their money. Although she's quite lacking in the chest department, not that he'd mention it out loud, the day he says it to his face is the day he'd die. 3. As they got inside the mall, there were even a lot of eyes looking in their direction, specifically Lumen. From the outsider's perspective, she's the only person that is out of place in our family. We, an average-looking family, had someone so beautiful by our side. However, no one from his family really cared about the attention they got. Well, Hitomi might be a bit uncomfortable by the stairs, but it was understandable since she isn't used to this kind of attention from the public. Hito noticed that some people were taking pictures of Lumen, while others were gossiping about her looks and theorizing that she's a supermodel or something. 1. Lumen didn't seem to be bothered by the attention that she's getting. It's like she's so used to being in the spotlight and became immune to them. Since she wasn't uncomfortable being taken pictures, then it's probably pointless for him to stop the people who took a photo of her. He was sure that Lumen would be popular overnight, he's just sure of it, now that her appearance is exposed on the internet. Following his parents, they arrived at a popular branded clothing store, where the clothes were neatly displayed, and looking at the price he couldn't help but wince at the sheer number of them. Holy shit, who sells a t-shirt for 5 million yen? It wasn't even a set, damn it. To his surprise, it wasn't even the most expensive in the store, he thought. Are they sure that this isn't robbery? 1. Heck, he could buy dozens of outfits if he were to buy somewhere that isn't here. Hito knew that his family could afford this, and he was sure it wouldn't put a slight dent in their total assets considering there's a lot of zeros on it. However, his commoner upbringing screams at how unreasonable these prices are. He could buy a lot of things with that 5 million yen. This is why he could never understand rich people, even though he's one of those rich people. As they stepped inside the luxurious store, they were immediately greeted by a group of employees. May we assist you, ma'am and sirs? You may. His mother ordered like it was totally normal, at least to her. Then, we recommend this. The head employee started recommending ridiculous clothes that he can't comprehend since he has zero sense of fashion. He wasn't listening half of the time and was dragged by the women to dress him up. He didn't resist since it would only make things harder, not to mention pointless. Hito had no love for dressing up. He hoped that this would be over soon. He literally had no patience for this. It's been 3 or 4 hours or something. He can't really remember what happened in the clothing shop, as his brain literally stopped functioning at the moment. The only time he reacted was when he saw how much money they spent in this obviously scam-branded store. 197,564,300 yen. 4. That's how much his parents paid for clothes they bought from this store. His mother didn't even blink as she paid for it, making the employees smile brightly as they heard the credit card acceptance noise. 2. Yeah, they are happy all right. He wondered how much percentage they get from successfully selling these clothes. Honestly, his parents could just bought the dresses and the tuxedos alone, but no, his mother insisted on buying more from this scam of a store. No matter how much they say they used high-quality resources, that's just lip service, well mostly. His sister's stomach suddenly growled from hunger, making his mother smile. I suppose you're all hungry from all of that dressing up session. Let's go to the nearest restaurant, kids. No one complained because they were definitely hungry. After that they followed her to the nearest restaurant inside the mall. And honestly, he wasn't even surprised. It was another internationally famous restaurant for the rich. Their food prices were as ridiculous as the clothing store before. Damn it, he really couldn't get used to this. His average Japanese life upbringing is denying him from enjoying the experience of being rich, knowing that he's literally eating dishes that cost as much as gold. Even a glass of water cost $2. What the hell is this? 7. Everything is simply overpriced. His sister was looking at the prices in unconcealed disbelief. The only people from our group that weren't uncomfortable with the price were his parents and Lumen. They act like there's nothing wrong with it. Imudo-chan, I'm probably not going to get used to this, he said while looking at Hitomi with a serious expression. 4. Me too, Unai-chan, me too. Hitomi agreed while sighing deeply. The 7/11th incident. 10. Hito. After that luxurious shopping, honestly, he didn't want to participate in that kind of wastefulness again if possible, but clearly, it's too much because his fate is sealed the moment his parents revealed that they were rich, not to mention the fact that he could have anything with the right points. His life isn't normal, and it will never be. There's only one thing he could do, and it's to adapt. Humans are good with it. Since he was technically part human, he would adapt eventually. Right now he was on his way to his neighborhood nearest 7-Elevens. He was going to buy a snack for his sister and Lumen since they're going to have a movie marathon tonight since there's no class tomorrow, meaning they could sleep late and no one would wake them up. It didn't take him long to arrive at the 7-Eleven store. He went directly inside, and honestly, it was relieving to see the prices of the beverage. So cheap? 3. Wait, no, it's starting to affect him. The prices aren't cheap, they are mostly reasonable, unlike the overpriced things in the mall. He bought several different kinds of snacks, both salty and sweet. Naturally, he didn't forget to buy the drinks. 1. Hito bought several cans of Mountain Dew, but of course, he also bought a few other canned juices, since he wasn't sure if the girls would like the Mountain Dew. Everyone has their preference for soft drinks and this happens to be Mountain Dew, but it can't be said for his sister and Lumen. 2. To be fair, both never specify which drink they wanted, so he's going to buy a few canned soft drinks. 1. Coca-Cola, 1. Sprite, 6. 7-Up, 2. Pepsi, 1. Red Bull and a few more. He could afford it, especially now that his parents gave him a separate credit card that has $1 million inside it. They said he can do whatever he wants with it, and he had no idea what to do with it. To begin with, he wasn't the type of person to spend much on anything. Maybe he'd buy a PC set or something. That would be a start. 2. After taking anything he needed, he went toward the counter along with the basket he's carrying. It was almost full. Most of the things inside his basket were canned drinks. No surprise there. If this was before, there's no way he'd buy this much even with a lot of money, but because it would be too heavy to carry this beverage. Must have been at least 20k. With his current strength it would cause him to have zero strain to carry them all to his house. However, as he arrived at the counter, the cashier was already checking someone's item, not that he minded though. The person that the cashier was checking for wore a bit of orange, black, and white jumpsuit. His appearance is your typical average Japanese guy, like him. 1. Or at least because his dreamscape happened. Hito wasn't blind to see that his appearance was slowly getting better. Anyway, the guy bought natto ramen? Huh, that's typical. After that, it was his turn. Now, he was waiting for the cashier to finish doing his thing. Almost immediately Hito flinched as he felt the sheer prana that was gathered outside the store. It was almost an infinite amount of it, and he almost suffocated from that raw amount of prana. His neck snapped in the direction outside the store. He couldn't see anything, and he realized he needed to activate his mystic eyes because what's happening right now is something a normal human couldn't see. As soon as he did, he saw a violet tentacle-like hand warped at the guy earlier, but before he could act, it was too late. The guy was already taken by the weird violet tentacle-like hands from who knows where. 10. What the hell did I just witness? He muttered in disbelief. Are you alright, sir? The cashier asked, concerned as she noticed his shock. Hito shifted his attention toward the cashier and smiled warily. Yeah, I thought I saw something, but I suppose it's just my imagination. Oh, sorry for overacting then. Here's everything. The cashier apologized and then gave him the things he bought. You don't need to. Anyway, how much? 20,753 yen. It's a bit more than he expected. Anyway, he had to pay and get out of here fast. Who knows that it might be him next that was going to get teleported from who knows where. He gave his credit card to the cashier, and after paying for his groceries, he didn't hesitate to leave. However, he was particularly cautious of that spot where that dude disappeared. After he was at a considerable distance, he could finally sigh in relief. He felt a bit bad for that guy, as there's nothing he could do at that moment. It was so unexpected that it caught him off guard. Hito could only give his good luck to the guy. Hopefully, he won't suffer much from his destination. But that hope won't happen anytime soon, as he didn't know that guy's life is going to be filled with suffering. 9. He arrived at his house with the goods. He desperately tried to forget about the incident a while ago, but he couldn't. It was impossible for him to forget about it. That raw amount of prana is the biggest he has ever seen in this world, meaning that his world is capable of hosting that kind of prana. Meaning his world isn't simple as he thought. He knew supernatural existence due to the fact there's ghosts around, but magic is another thing. 3. He originally thought that he's the only one capable of using magecraft in his reality, but he might be wrong with his assumption. If there is indeed another user in this world, he'd like to meet them. However, he wasn't naive enough to think that they'd be good people. Humans are humans after all. While they are capable of good, they are also capable of evil. He walked toward the living room and saw his sister and Lumen were already watching Netflix. Not that he minded though, but he hoped at least that they'd wait for him. So, you guys started watching without me? He fakes pouting at them. While Lumen felt a bit guilty, his sister didn't. Nah, why would we wait for you? It's boring. You'd think that I'd just stare at the screen blankly without playing anything. Fair enough. He could see her point. Then he tried to sit right next to his sister, only he failed as she glared at him. Nope, don't try to take this comfortable spot. He frowned, then he looked at Lumen and said, you don't mind if I sit right next to you? No, I don't. Lumen shook her head. Alright then. After he was given permission, he sat right next to Lumen. He was so close to getting into skin contact with her. Then his sister suddenly pushed him with her leg. My bad, I just wanna stretch my legs, you know. 1. Now, he was having a skin-to-skin contact with Lumen. God, she smelled nice. Wait, that's the same shampoo his sister uses, so why is it different with hers? He knew why, but he's just in denial. 1. Hito glared at his sister who's smirking at him. He knew that she was doing this on purpose. What? I'm serious though. He let out a sigh. He would never admit that he's actually thankful for this. Whatever. Then he shifts his head toward Lumen and she does the same. Both were now looking at each other's faces. He never got this close to her. He could hear his heart beating wildly. To be this close to his crush made him blush. God, why is his heart beating like this? She didn't even do anything aside from staring at his face. He quickly averted his eyes from her face, because he'd blushed even more. He can't help it. Because he averted his gaze, he didn't see the same amount of blush that was in Lumen's face. 1. And the only person who saw this was Hitomi, who was giggling in amusement and thought, it's so cute watching them like this. I'm pretty sure the two of them don't realize that they have feelings for each other, whether it's just like or love, who knows, but one thing for sure, they're attracted to each other. This is better than any drama I watch on TV. At that moment, Hitomi swore that she'd make them a couple. For their benefit and her entertainment. 4. Though, she noticed that her brother bought a lot of canned drinks and thought, how are we going to finish this? They couldn't finish it. Hito was in his dreamscape again. Like he promised himself, he won't go to another reality for a week or so, because if that reality is anything similar to Emir's, he'd be emotionally drained. 1. God, that place was terrible. He is terrible. He can't believe that he caused genocide. And the worst of all, he didn't regret what he did. He wasn't always like this. Something caused him to change, and he didn't know that something. Hito let out a sigh and went to his own reality to meet with Emir and the former slaves. Reunion. Hito. Arriving at the Shinomiya, he couldn't believe how large it was. At this point, it's like he's going inside a castle instead of a huge mansion. He wasn't even out of his father's Bugatti yet. He wondered how long he would arrive at the Shinomiya estate by walking on foot. 1. Probably a half hour or more before they could enter the gates, a security guard asked his father to stop and questioned them if they had an invitation card. Which they do. After checking that it's valid, only then they were allowed to go inside beyond the gate. Thank God that his father's newest car has some air conditioning, or else he'd be like roasted chicken. Man, tuxedo is such a tight suit. While he was wearing a black tuxedo with a blue tie, while his sister and Lumen were wearing blue and white luxurious dresses. Looking at Lumen, when he first saw her wear that white dress, his brain needed to reboot for an entire minute, because what he just saw was otherworldly. 2. It was something that humans weren't supposed to see, or at least what he thought. It's an exaggeration, he knows, but that's how beautiful she is in his eyes. It took a few minutes for his father to park the car, and as soon as he did, Hito was the first to leave the car. While it isn't hot inside, it's simply a bit tight for 5 people. 4. But then again, this car was meant for 4 people to begin with. He started stretching his arms, and not moving for an entire hour made his body a bit sore. 4. Now, only if these people could stop watching him stretching. It wasn't a big deal. What's up with them gossiping with each other? He wondered what he did wrong. He didn't know that stretching in public was seen as uncivilized in upper-class society. Even if he did, he wouldn't care anyway. He was raised with a mentality of a commoner. Why would he bother changing now? But all of a sudden their gossiping stopped completely when Lumen got out of the Bugatti. Their eyes widened in awe, surprise, and shock at her otherworldly beauty. In their eyes, she was the perfect example of a person of upper-class society. Her appearance, her aura, and the way she handled herself were screaming nobility. Not that he noticed it before, nor that he cared for him. Lumen is Lumen. 2. Then the rest of his family got out of the car. Hitomi noticed the stare of the people around them and couldn't help but say, as expected of Lumen, even rich people weren't spared by her beauty. Hitomi approached him and suddenly elbowed his ribcage, making him groan in pain. He glared at his sister and said, "What? Aren't you too carefree? There's a lot of rich young heirs of their respective companies here. Someone might know." "Scratch that. I'm certain that someone will ask for her hand in this party, so better ask her soon or else you'll find Lumen taken from you," Hitomi warned him. Hito wanted to say something, but nothing came out of his mouth because what his sister said is true. In this party, there would be a dance event, that's for sure, because that's how upper-class society works. A party without dancing isn't perfect, that goes without saying. After hearing Hitomi's warning, he looked around and saw a few teenagers his age were looking at Lumen in an unconcealed interest. Some of them were even looking at her in lust. While he understood why they lusted after her, it doesn't mean he's fine with them looking at her with such a gaze. If it's possible, he'd like to slap them in their faces for even attempting to do that. He didn't wait for soon and directly asked Lumen, "Would you like to dance with me?" later after the dance event starts. 5. Even Hitomi, his sister, was surprised by his bold action. She never thought her brother had this kind of courage. Lumen paused at the unexpected invitation. She felt her cheeks a bit hot, and his bold action made her heart flutter a bit. She already knows her answer. There's no way she'd reject his invitation. If she were to dance with someone, it would be him. "I do. Please take care of me." "No, please take care of me. Because I have no idea how to dance," Hito admitted with a sheepish smile. Lumen blinked a couple of times before answering. "Oh." Then her lips curved into a smile. "I suppose I'll have to teach you then." "Oh, please do." He smiled back at her. While they were busy with each other, both didn't realize that Hito's parents and sister were looking at the scene with a smile, too. Especially Mommy Jean. Era Papa, I think I'm going to be a grandmother soon." "Me too, dear, me too." Her husband agreed with his wife. 2. Jean couldn't help but squeal at the thought of spoiling her grandchildren, her cute babies who have mixed color hair of blonde and black. Hitomi couldn't help but scratch her cheeks at this development. She did vow that she'd be a wing woman for both of them, but with how bold his brother is, maybe her help wasn't needed at all. 2. She doesn't remember her brother this bold, but she certainly wasn't complaining. They were now inside the mansion. If the outside was enough to amaze him, then the inside surprised him. It was like he's in another period entirely, like in the age of kings and knights. That's how he felt being in this place. Red carpet, butlers, and maids standing side to side, waiting for orders. Now only, if there's a knight wearing steel armor, then they'd be truly in the Middle Ages. It didn't take long for his family to arrive in the banquet hall. He never thought he'd experience something that he'd only see in movies or TV shows. Everything looks fancy as heck, and he felt out of place. Thankfully it wasn't just him who felt this way, his sister also felt uncomfortable. Following his mother, they arrived at the intersection of the banquet hall, where the most important people gathered. There they met his supposed uncle, the older brother of his mother Ganon Shinomiya. He was an older man, sitting in a wheelchair. He looked really sick. Hito became a bit concerned about this man. Should he really be here? He should be at the hospital with his sickly appearance, but at the same time he can't help but respect the man despite his health. He still attended. Well, suppose it's his own birthday party, but still. Suddenly his mother approached Ganon and suddenly hugged him, making everyone around them stare at his mother in shock, especially the girl with red eyes and long black hair. He couldn't help but think, why are they acting like that? Wait, could it be that they didn't recognize their mother? If that's the case, then it would certainly explain why they were so shocked by his mother's action. One of them called the security guard. "Guards, take this woman away from Otosama." Everyone was looking at the commotion with interest, probably wanting to see his mother being taken away, but before it happened, Ganon Shinomiya spoke. Stop. The security guards stopped their movement, while the others were confused about why he stopped them. Ganon let out a weary sigh. Jean, I see you haven't changed at all. Still the same after a decade of not seeing each other. His mother let out a smirk and replied. Of course, why would I change Nii-san? Hearing that revelation, everyone in the banquet hall couldn't help but gasp in shock. Even the others who were close to Ganon were shocked at this development. 3. Hito couldn't help but think about what he thought about the other day, so he took it back. If his mother and her brother don't have a good relationship, then they wouldn't act like this. He was wrong in his assumption. Suddenly the girl with red eyes asked in unconcealed shock. Otosama, I didn't know you had a sister. That was his only answer. He didn't say anything more until his mother slapped him on the back. Oh, poor guy. Why are you so damn cold to your daughter? His mother said without any filler in her mouth. If it was anyone, they'd be begging for their lives for being disrespectful, but there's an exception and that's Jean. Ganon knew exactly his sister's personality, she's blunt and isn't afraid to say what's on her mind. This is why Ganon doesn't want to deal with his mother. Let me introduce you to my sister Jean Shinomiya. His mother rolled her eyes and said. It's Tadano, Shinomiya is my middle name now. However, Ganon ignored that and then stared at them. So, this is my niece and nephew. It's been a decade since I've seen you Hitohito. Hito couldn't help but blink as Ganon mentioned him. He couldn't remember meeting this man. If you don't remember that's fine, you were still a toddler at that time. Then Ganon shifted his attention toward Lumen and said, so this is your adopted daughter, indeed she's beautiful as you claimed. Now everyone's attention was on Lumen, and none could refute what Ganon said, because out of everyone in this room, Lumen is the most beautiful. Familial warmth. Kagaya. Kagaya never thought she'd see the day her father would show several emotions in a single moment. As far as she could remember his father only had a cold expression on his face and nothing more. 3. But, aside from that discovery she didn't know that she had an aunt. She never knew her existence until today. Still, it's unbelievable to see that her father and her aunt named Jean are related. Aside from their appearance, they hardly had the same personality. She's way too carefree. Her maid and friend, Ai Hayasaka was as just surprised as her. Let's be honest, nobody expected this, even her half-brothers didn't. Suddenly her aunt shifted her attention to her as soon as she finished talking with her father. Her aunt approached her and hugged her. Kagaya was so stunned that her brain circuit shut down for a moment and then she snapped out of it after hearing her aunt say, oh, my dear niece, I haven't seen you since you were 2 years old. You were so little and adorable back then. Her voice was filled with affection and warmth. Such a thing couldn't be faked, because she knows what a fake is. For the first time in her life, she felt love. A genuine family affection. Then after her aunt stopped hugging her, she suddenly felt disappointed. In her life, she never knew what familial love is, since her family is dull and cold, without warmth. That's why she gave up what it's like to feel familial love because she knew that it would never happen with the family she had. Until now, that is, she met a woman, her aunt, a direct relative of hers that she never knew existed, who gave her a warm affectionate hug, that she thought she wouldn't be able to experience in this life. And nice to meet you Oba-sama. Too formal Kagaya-chan? Just call me Jean or Oba, or even Mama if you want, her aunt said with a smile. Kagaya was truly lost for words. A family with a personality like hers is so strange to her, as most of her family are cold and calculating individuals. However, this kind of change wasn't unwelcome at all. It felt refreshing to have a family member who isn't cold to her. Then, Oba, Kagaya said hesitantly. Yes, that's it. Are you sure that you won't call me Mama? Because I don't mind adopting you and this guy can't do anything to stop that from happening. Her aunt pointed at her father. Her jaw dropped for a bit, such a bold declaration, and to her surprise, her father didn't react negatively. He only let out a sigh, nothing more and nothing less. And for your information, his father doesn't sigh. There's truly a first for everything. And no, but I appreciate the offer. With all honesty, she was quite tempted to accept it, as this place was oppressing and cold, life and dull. Alright then, anyway why don't you talk with your cousin? I'm going to talk with Mr. Hardas here. Have fun. Then she left and talked to her father once more. She's quite the character, her friend and maid Ai said with a surprised voice. Indeed she is, Kagaya muttered. If your father didn't say that she's his brother, I wouldn't know that they're related to each other, as their personalities are opposite, Ai admitted. 1. Me too. If her father didn't personally admit it to the public, she too wouldn't expect Jean to be her aunt. She's too different from them. Which isn't actually a bad thing. I think you should talk to your cousin. Well, cousins since there's 3 of them, Ai said while looking at her. Kagaya nodded and thought. I wonder if they're anything like their mother. Hito. We were approached by the girl with red eyes and her maid, and then she spoke to them in a polite and formal way. It's nice to meet you. If I may, I'd like to know your names. Hitomi Tadano. Nice to meet Cha. His sister greeted her first. It was his turn next. Hitohito Tadano, but feel free to call me Hito. Then it's Lumen's turn. Lumen Tadano. Kagaya Shinomiya. She introduced herself. Then he realized that the maid beside her didn't take any action to introduce herself, which was odd, so he pointed her out. What about you, miss? Would you like to introduce yourself? Her maid was a bit surprised that he called her out. However, her surprise disappeared as quickly as it arrived. It's Ai Hayasaka, Hito-sama. His face winced at the way she called him. It felt uncomfortable being called in such a respectful way. AI noticed the look on his face and quickly jumped to a conclusion that he was displeased. She quickly bowed and apologized as politely as she positively could. Forgive me, if I called you in such a manner. I'll refrain from calling you with familiarity in the future. God, this is painful to watch. He can't stand people acting in a polite and respectful way such as this. He likes it when people talk casually to him. No, it's fine, it's just, feel uncomfortable to mention my name in such a respectful way. You know, if I can cut all the polite manners and all because I'm not used to this kind of thing. It's the same with my sister, I think. He wasn't sure if his sister agrees with him. Of course, I feel the same. Hitomi protest. Good to know that she feels the same. Kaguya and AI were surprised by his words. They did not expect him to say that at all. I see, so you don't mind me talking casually with you guys? AI asked while looking at him, Hitomi, and Lumen. Hitomi nodded. To be fair, we've been raised as an average Japanese teenagers. It's no surprise that being talked politely and respectfully like you did is uncomfortable to us. That's right, we didn't even know that we're rich or even a relative of yours until the other day, he added, looking at each other in surprise. Then Kaguya asked, you weren't raised as a scion of a wealthy family, but as an average teenager. Why did he feel jealous inside her? Is she jealous about our commoner life or something? 5. That's right, so forgive us if we aren't aware of the customs of the upper society. We are new to this, Hito admitted. I see. Kaguya remained silent for a moment, before asking, do you mind telling me how life is as an average Japanese teenager? I'd like to know what it's like to be one. Hitomi suddenly grinned at her question and replied, that is something we can talk about all day, although do tell us what it is like to be an heiress of a company in exchange for telling you how we lived our lives as a commoner. Kaguya nodded in understanding. That's fair, I suppose. Then let's continue this discussion somewhere more private. After all, I don't want anyone to interrupt our conversation. I don't see any problem with that. Let's go. Both he and Lumen were looking at each other and he said, we'll follow them then. I suppose. You know, you were silent the entire time. Why is that? He asked curiously. Well, I didn't want to interrupt, plus I see no reason to join. Lumen replied. Fair enough, alright then. He didn't pry anymore and followed Kaguya and AI to a private location. In the private part of the banquet hall, where there's literally a line between the masses and their table, Hitomi was talking about his and her life experiences as an average Japanese teenager. While AI didn't show much interest, she still listened anyway. However, Kaguya's reaction was different, and she was fascinated by her stories. Even simple things like 7-Eleventh's interest her and having miso soup and egg rolls as lunch. He couldn't help but think, how did she live her life exactly when such simple mundane things fascinate her? What? That's ridiculous. You people eat food without worrying about the calories? That's unacceptable, not to mention unhealthy. Kaguya exclaimed like she just heard the most unbelievable thing in the world. Again, how did this heiress live her life? That's how it is, princess. Most commoners don't really care about how many calories we eat. Hitomi replied cheerfully at Kaguya. Kaguya blinked. Princess. That's right, I'll call you princess since you're basically the heiress of the Shinomiya group. That's like a modern term for a princess. Hitomi said. You're not exactly wrong about that? Kaguya muttered at this. He felt conflicted emotions inside her. He couldn't help but think, she doesn't like being called a princess or something. That's quite a surprise since most girls like to be called such, but then again Kaguya Shinomiya isn't most girls. Enough about us, now tell us about your life as an heiress of the Shinomiya group. Feel free to leave some details that you're uncomfortable sharing. We respect privacy. Hito reminded her. That's right. Hitomi nodded, while Lumen just listened. Very well. Kaguya was quite happy with this arrangement. Then she started telling her life as an heiress of a multi-trillionaire company. Dense 1. Hito. Hito was already ready to listen to her side of story. He was interested in knowing what the life of a multi-trillionaire heiress is like. He guessed that it wouldn't be all butterflies and sunshine. After all, that's the rule of life. None can have a perfect everything. He gathered all of his attention toward Kaguya as she started talking. Well, my life isn't as exciting as yours. Instead, it felt boring and dull. I guess I'll start with my childhood. From the moment I was 4 years old, I already have my own schedule, which is from day to night. Everything is planned on what activities I'm going to do. Learning calligraphy, piano, dancing, and language study. Kaguya had a thoughtful look on her face as if she was trying to remember something. I've had the same schedule for like 5 years, and after that, I've gained another set of schedule where my sleep, my food is controlled and planned. As she continued, everyone aside from AI couldn't help but sweat at that. They know that life is far from perfect, but hearing a summary of Kaguya's life for years seemed really dull compared to them. Princess, did you at least enjoy learning them? Hitomi asked hastily. No, not all. Kaguya shook her head. And just like that, Hitomi didn't know what to say. Honestly, he wasn't sure if Kaguya was doing this on purpose, making the atmosphere awkward, but looking at her genuine expression, it's fair to say that it wasn't intentional at all. Right, what about your school life? At least you enjoyed it, right? Hitomi was getting a bit desperate to change the atmosphere. However, she doesn't seem to be succeeding. My school life? I don't know if I enjoyed it or not. There was a time when it was peaceful and times when it's unbearably annoying. Some of Otosama Associates' children were trying to form a bond with me. Most of them have an ulterior motive of trying to befriend me, for the benefit, but of course who wouldn't want to, since after all, they wanted to gain Otosama's favor through me. Kagaya said it was a matter of fact. Hitomi deflated after hearing that answer. Now she truly doesn't have anything to say to her as the atmosphere was getting unbearable. Hito decided to finally step up from the conversation, but before he could say anything, all of a sudden his mother Jean arrived at their private table. Oh, I finally found you children. Thankfully all of you stayed inside the banquet hall and not somewhere in the estate, or else the poor me would have a hard time searching for you. His mother cried dramatically. Honestly, seeing her act like this reminded him back when he was in middle school. He thought that her mother was already done with this kind of antics, but it seems he was wrong. However, he was a bit thankful for her interference because her presence alone made the oppressing atmosphere calm down significantly. And the funny part is Kagaya wasn't even aware of it. Just how bad is she at reading the atmosphere? Wait, that sound kinda familiar. Isn't that what he is back in middle school? Someone who had no idea how to read the atmosphere? 1. Then his mother suddenly started searching inside her handbag, and after she found what she's looking for, she took it out and showed a picture of toddlers playing with a magical girl stick. 3. He couldn't see it clearly, however, it wasn't going to be a problem as his mother slammed, like literally the picture into the table of their gathering. Curiously, all of them stared at the toddlers in the picture. After looking at it, everyone had a surprised look, or at least eyes wide at what they saw. Kagaya-sama, isn't that? AI asked in surprise at the picture on the table. Indeed, AI, it's me. And Kagaya's red eyes stare at him. Ah, he did remember his mother mentioning this picture the other day. He did think that it really existed. A picture of him and Kagaya as a toddler while playing with a magical girl stick. And yes, that includes him too. Thank God for small mercies that at least his mother didn't dress him up like a magical girl, or else it would have been embarrassing. That's me, to think you and I met before, huh? He stared at Kagaya's red eyes and wondered how terrifying they are in the dark. 1. I didn't remember this at all. Kagaya hummed as she stared back at the picture on the table. Of course, you won't. It would be strange if you did. Judging by how old we are in the picture, I think a year or two, and most children don't gain awareness until they're 4. He replied. Oh, how can you be so sure about that? Kagaya's attention shifts back to him. Do you remember anything before you were 4? He pressed. 4. No, not all, Kagaya admitted quite easily. Then there's your answer. Fair enough. Suddenly he felt someone tug his sleeve. He looked at the culprit. It was his sister. What is it? You look adorable in this picture, Hitomi said with a grin. Yeah, sure. Hito didn't see the point of her saying that. Wouldn't you be more adorable if you wore a magical girl outfit? Hito's eyes widened and immediately denied it. Nope, we are not going there. Don't mention that again. And that's going to stop me. Hitomi looked at him haughtily. Hito stares at his sister in the eyes and realizes that she's not going to give it up. Then he lets out a resigned sigh. You know, back in 6th grade, it was Halloween when my sis dash. Hitomi's hand blurred and quick to cover his mouth. He looked at her and saw her face burned red. If this was an anime, he'd see smoke coming out of her head. Do not mention that incident. She shouted at him with shame and embarrassment. Her shouting gained the others' attention. They were now looking at her with curiosity and confusion. It was his turn to look at her haughtily, and silently gave her a message that only us siblings would understand. Try me, bitch. 2. Bastard. Hitomi gritted her teeth, while he was looking at her with a proud smile of victory. She thought that she could outsmart him. Too bad he outsmarted her. Outsmarting? 2. Hitomi, what's wrong? Lumen asked, a bit concerned because of how red her face was. And nothing, Lu-chan. Hitomi played it off as nothing. However, he knows and Lumen knows that it wasn't the case at all. 1. Lucky for her that Lumen isn't the one to pry with private matters, so she didn't press her for an answer anymore, making Hitomi sigh in relief and then started glaring at him. However, he ignored that. He took a cup of tea and then drank it with a smile on his face. Women. 17. Suddenly the announcer talked about the dancing event, making him look at Lumen, who was also looking at him. Both of them had the same thought. He stood up from the table and approached Lumen, and gave her a hand. Milady, may I take you to a dance? He remained stoic, but there's a hint of redness on his cheeks. What he said was so goddamn cheesy as hell. 1. It was a line that he learned from a Disney movie, and saying it with his own mouth is 100 times more embarrassing than saying it in his mind. Thankfully though, Lumen didn't laugh, instead made her flustered a bit. Sure. She took his hand and went to the dancing space, where everyone was watching them. Now that they are on the dance floor, Hito said. As I mentioned before, I don't know how to dance. Would you guide me? I will, Lumen replied and smiled for a bit. You know, it's kind of ironic since it's supposed to be the guy who is guiding the girl and not the opposite. Lumen couldn't help but roll her eyes at his words. Says, who? The media. You know that they can't be trusted, right? 2. I know. So why are you stereotyping? Lumen looked at him with amusement. Just because. He replied. You know what? Forget about everything. I'm your guide and I won't allow your thoughts to wander. Look at me, focus, and let's enjoy the moment. Lumen stared at him in the eyes. Hito was a bit surprised at her sudden assertiveness. As far as he's aware, Lumen had been shy. Then he realized that this might be the real Lumen, the her before her despair, the her before he found her in that crater. Now, follow my lead. He did, and quite easily so, as it wasn't that complicated. Hito enjoyed it more than he should have. Lumen was also enjoying their dance. They were simply stuck in their own world as both of them didn't realize that everyone's eyes were watching them. They were captivated by their dancing. Both didn't realize that they were being watched until the end of the song, and they saw everyone from the banquet hall start clapping at them. Hito and Lumen looked into each other's eyes and thought, what the hell happened?